welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man that just displaced some water after he did a cannonball in a pool while holding a chicken burrito. It's Tom Tresimer.
Put the forces at weapons posture 1. Warning red. Weapons tight. Mark, I want everything loaded.
On it. How are we going to get this 1,000-pound missile through the entire battleship? I love that scene. Oh, my gosh. So
we're going to carry it.
So here's the deal. Tom has been a guest on the pod for the last couple of years. He's done some wonderful episodes with us. But I got to know Tom in the Atlanta film industry in the early 2010s. And in the industry, Tom is known as the guy who just violently defends Battleship. Not violently, but you're like a honey badger.
If it comes to violence, I will resort to that in a heartbeat.
You're basically the honey badger of Battleship fans. And so you and I have always gotten along because I was always a fan of the film. I was able to get on the massive vibe. I had fun with it. I think it offers just a lot of fun moments that people didn't even look at. They kind of glossed over. But I think a lot of people know that they can mess with you about Battleship, and so you'll get in the arguments. But you're the Battleship aficionado of the Atlanta film industry. I just got to tell you that, Tom.
It might be a club of one, to be honest. I don't know if there's anyone else. Maybe you as well. But yeah, I've always been made fun of, hopefully lightheartedly by others for my love of this movie.
So this movie has a 34% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, 5.8 on IMDb, which isn't great. So it's Battleship. It's a movie based on a board game, which I love. It's a great board game, and they did include some neat aspects of this, but it's also a $200 million budgeted bonkers fest without an A-list star that this is my main complaint of Battleship, Tom, and I want to see what you think, because this isn't me challenging you. I know what happens. You turn into a honey badger, and you just start rolling around on the ground, so I don't want that to happen.
I will turn into Admiral Shane here.
Now, it feels like a Michael Bay movie. I have fun with Michael Bay movies, but it just if you didn't know that, if you watch this, you're like, oh, Michael Bay movie. It doesn't have enough of a personality of its own, I guess.
It does feel heavily Michael Bay, especially with the CGI aspects of it. Yeah. I think a lot of that is probably brought in by Hasbro as well, because if I'm not mistaken, didn't they do Transformers?
Yeah, and also the CGI, man, is ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
this is excellent looking special effects.
It is,
but I guess for me, it's more about the kind of manic dialogue and the unnecessarily mean characters. So after spending a lot of time with this movie in the last couple of weeks, I've always loved it. Like the chicken burrito bit at the end when Liam Neeson says, "Go get a chicken burrito." I don't think there's a scene that makes me happier than when Mick fights the alien and punches his teeth out. This former veteran who lost his legs and he's punching an alien's teeth out. It's a former Golden Glove box. It's beautiful. I love that moment. But there's a scene where Jesse Plemons' character, Jesse Plemons, isn't that crazy? Friday Night Lights reunion. Taylor Kitsch, Peter Berg, Jesse Plemons. But he goes up.
I read one review that called him the poor man's Matt Damon.
Oh, that's terrible. But I don't think they ever watched Friday Night Lights because he is so good in that show.
He is great.
But Plemons goes up to Alex Hopper, played by Taylor Kitsch, and he's trying to tell him about his lizard and how aliens can't handle the sunlight. And Hopper's just
Penelope second, the third, or something like that.
Yeah, Penelope the third, and they took him to the beach. It was a terrible idea. But Hopper's just so mean to him during that scene. And it's just the unnecessary meanness to it that I don't enjoy in this film. But I do still have fun with it, and the 2 hours do blast by.
Yeah, I think part of that meanness too is, I'm not going to pretend to know the inner workings of the military hierarchy and ranking.
I'm sure glad you aren't, because you're like, you know what, Mark, on these battleships, this is what happens when you're fighting aliens.
Yeah, about it. Well, I mean, Alex Hopper is a lieutenant in that movie, and Jesse Plemons is a boatswain's mate. So, I think there's a pretty huge gap there between the rankings. Like, I don't know how often you would have somebody of Orty's level talking with Lieutenant Hopper. So, I think they do have some sort of friendship there on the side, but, at work, it's kind of one of those things of maybe a PA coming up and jabbering around with a UPM. Like, you just don't see it often.
I would lose my mind if that happened. A line producer chatting with a PA. One time, one of the main producers on a big movie came up and talked to me, and I froze. I didn't do anything.
Deer in headlights.
Yeah, I didn't do anything. Wait, what? Wasn't me.
You probably knew about movies, films, and flicks.
No,
wanted to ask you.
She started talking to me about movies because it was a really boring studio shoot it was just laborious, and there's just hours of downtime. So we would just sit around and talk about movies, and then eventually someone came up and I just was afraid. So I get what you're saying, but it's just, I guess for me, it's the aliens have attacked. And your world is under destruction, and you need any ideas that you can have. Does that mean, I don't know.
No, I get it. But I think it's one of those things, too. It's like Hopper is the last person in charge of that. That still would have been on the USS Paul Jones, I believe. So it's like that's the last destroyer that's available to them. And he's the senior ranking officer. And you've got this guy coming up to him talking about his lizard he took to the beach. So it's like at that, you take it at face value, I would probably be in the similar shoes there where I'm going to get agitated very, very quick at that man. But then, he starts to come around. He's got to work his way through the gibberish before he gets to the meat and potatoes of what he wants to tell Hopper.
Yeah, that's a weird scene. And that's kind of why I like this movie. There's some weird moments to this flick.
There are some weird moments.
But it's fun.
I kind of want to round back to your point about it being a Michael Bay-esque type movie. It is very similar to a Michael Bay movie, but it's almost without they've like trimmed the excess fat of Michael Bay movies off. It's like you don't have that overly long love story. It's like that kind of sets the movie, but then it goes by the wayside, within the first 20 minutes, and we don't get caught up into that.
I really
from there on out, it's just missiles and machine guns the entire time.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because, you think, Pearl Harbor, Transformers, all of those movies, The Rock, they all have the person they have the love interest, and then they have the person staring at computer screens crying later on.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. But I actually like Sam a lot in this movie, Brooklyn Decker. I know it was one of her first films. Pete Berg took a chance casting her, but I like the authority she had in this. Go talk to my dad. Do it. You got it. And I like the relationship between her and Mick, just up there saving people, and Mick trusts her driving, and I like them together. They found a way.
She's a physical therapist.
Yeah, you're right.
They made a physical therapist a hero, and that never happens.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I like the way they handled the character. That was fun. But yeah, this movie, it's interesting because it's almost universally disliked. And I guess I get it, but I honestly think, Tom, I don't know why I wouldn't lie about it, but I think people didn't like this movie from the beginning because it was that time where John Carter had a $200 million budget. I don't know, Lone Ranger hadn't hit quite yet, but there were just these movies coming out that had these $200 million budgets. They were quite excessive. People were sort of hating on them. Marvel was getting into its stride. And it was also Battleship. We're going to make a movie out of Battleship. So I think a lot of people went into it very sour.
Yeah, I think it's that whole preconceived notion of what they think this movie is going to be about. You think you're going to base a movie off of an 80-year-old board game at that point. And the game has no storyline to it. It's literally just 1v1
B-17.
Yeah, and you're throwing out coordinates to try to sink someone's battleship. So there's no story arc. There's no backstory to anything. So all of a sudden, we're going to make a feature-length narrative movie based off of the game. People are like, well, that's not going to go anywhere. Oh, yeah, but this is also about aliens. All right, well, no, it's definitely not going to go anywhere. So I think a lot of people went into it already with a negative outlook, a very pessimistic viewpoint. And that hurt it.
That's probably, do you think it's justified?
Maybe to an extent.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot of fun to be had in this film, though. This is a $200 million film with visual effects by ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, the Jurassic Park people. This movie came out, 9 years ago? But there's still some excellent moments that drop your jaw. Jaw dropping. Holy crap, words.
Either or.
Words. But yeah,
the movie gets you tongue-tied.
Yeah, and Also, while watching it the other day, that scene at the end where Liam Neeson's like, we'll go get a chicken burrito and we'll talk about your conditions of surrender. I got a little teary-eyed. It was weird.
Oh, yeah. So you text me that, and I wanted to know what that moment was that you got teary-eyed.
Well, I think he just knew about. I think he just knew about the chicken burrito, Liam Neeson, the entire time, and then he just said it to him. It was just a cool moment. It was a good moment. Another thing I want to talk to you about while watching this movie, and so I want to do the reason I brought you on, Tom, is not to have you defend it. I just want us to kind of let people know what maybe they missed that is good about this movie, or what their preconceived notions might have held. Or maybe you love this movie and you're listening to it and you're talking about, what are you talking about? This movie's amazing. But I think that at the core, another issue I have is I'm a huge fan of Taylor Kitsch, right? Friday Night Lights was one of my favorite TV shows. Second season got a little weird. Weird. But then it regrouped, and then it rallied, and it brought like Michael B. Jordan in. I mean, that had a great cast, that show. Peter Berg started it off. Kyle Chandler, Connie Britton, geez Louise.
Side note, is that streaming on anything right now?
It should be on Netflix.
Is it? Okay. I want to get back into that.
Like it's one of my favorite shows. Beautiful experience. Okay. The problem, I even bought the soundtrack. Taylor Kitsch in this movie, he's this super cool guy, but he's kind of a slacker. And then he goes to jail for breaking into a building. He gets the love of his life in Brooklyn Decker, but then he's still always late. And then he plays soccer, he kicks the best person out of the way, and he misses the shot. This is not a likable character, but I think Taylor Kitsch is likable. But I don't think there's anything to this guy that I ever cheer for him. For me, this movie's more about, I like Rihanna, I like Nagata, I like Cal Zapata, even though he's weird, played by Hamish Linklater. I dig the Beast. The Beast gets a fight scene with a alien. I dig Mick.
in the engine room.
Yeah, I love Mick. Mick is cool. It's just, for me, Hopper is not, there's no arc at all to Hopper. At all. And
I'm gonna beg the differ on this one.
Yeah, let's hear it. I want to hear it.
I think there's a big arc, because the whole movie starts off with him being that loser with a lot of potential. Like that one person that that if they can just, for lack of a better term, get their shit together, they can accomplish some really big things. Mm-hmm. But he always just keeps stumbling over his own feet. So it's like he's kind of at that point in his life. I don't know his exact age when the movie starts. You got to think like early 20s, because I think it picks up after the whole chicken burrito scene, like 6 years later or something like that, 7 years later. Mm-hmm. So it's like he's at that stage of his life where he's just out of college and he just doesn't know what he wants to do. And he's literally just kind of a lovable loser. But then over the course of the movie, like you got to think, then he joins the Navy, he enlists and goes through officer training, and he works his way up the ranks. And there's actually a line in the trailer that I don't think is ever in the movie that Liam Neeson tells him. It's when he's talking about like how frustrating he is that he is like the youngest officer in the Navy, in like the history of the Navy. Like he's worked his way up through the ranks so fast. Which is a whole other story. It's like, if he keeps screwing up, how does he keep getting all these chances?
Yeah, he's late all the time. Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to overlook that part. But it's like he always sets himself up for failure. But then by the end of the movie, he learns humility and he starts to become humble. You know, he gives his chair over to Nagata during the whole grid plot, actual battleship coordinate
water
drop.
Displacements.
Yeah, and then he ends up saving the day, and he saves the world, as he so eloquently puts it. So it's like, I think he does have a character arc to an extent, where it's like he's learning how to be a better person, to actually lead men instead of just having that title.
Well, for me, I guess he's just an awesome guy who becomes more awesome. Because 7 years later, he's still showing up late to everything.
Well, I'd probably show up late too if I was dating Brooklyn Decker.
Well, she was there waiting for him. So
yeah, I can't defend that part, but
it's frustrating, right? And now listen, I don't need every single one of my movie characters to have an arc. Like, they don't have to go from bumbling loser to